What if the monsters of our nightmares weren't born of the supernatural, but forged in the crucible of human history? What if the most chilling tales weren't spun from fiction, but from the brutal realities of a distant past? And what if the very name that evokes fear and bloodlust in our modern minds, Dracula, belonged to a man whose legacy is far more terrifying and far more complex than any vampire myth could ever capture? In the annals of history, some names don't just echo, they scream with a chilling resonance, a whisper of both terror and a strange, unyielding defiance. One such name, Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia. But you know him better, don't you? As Vlad the Impaler. Yes, that Dracula. Forget your capes and charming fangs. The real story is far more complex, far more nuanced, and frankly, a whole lot more pointy. Was he a madman, a demon given flesh, or a desperate patriot forced to become monstrous to save his people? Tonight, on Ancient Unearth, we peel back centuries of myth and speculation to uncover the truth about the man who inspired the monster. Prepare, because you will need to question everything you thought you knew. Our journey begins not in a Gothic crypt, but in the bustling Transylvanian town of Sighisoara in the year 1431. Young Vlad wasn't born into a life of leisure. Wallachia, his homeland, was a small principality caught in the crossfire of empires. The sprawling, ambitious Ottoman Empire to the east, and the Christian kingdoms of Europe, particularly Hungary, to the west. It was a geopolitical chessboard, and Wallachia was often the pawn. His father, Vlad II, was a formidable figure himself, a voivode, or prince, who earned a fascinating nickname, Dracula. Not because he was a monster, but because he was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric society dedicated to fighting the Ottoman Turks. Dracula, in Romanian, meant dragon. So, when Vlad III came along, he became Dracula, son of the dragon. But in modern Romanian, however, Drac can also mean, well, devil. A prophetic twist of linguistic fate, perhaps. Vlad's childhood was no fairy tale. In 1442, a shocking diplomatic move by his father sealed Vlad's fate. As a pledge of loyalty to the Ottoman Sultan Murad II, Vlad II surrendered his two youngest sons, Vlad and his younger brother, Radu, as hostages. Imagine it. A young boy, barely a teenager, torn from his home and sent to live in the heart of the enemy's empire. Death was near. For 5 formative years, from roughly 1442 to 1448, Vlad endured this captivity. While some accounts suggest they were educated in the arts, science, and the art of war, whispers persist of torture and beatings, particularly for the stubborn and defiant Vlad. His brother Radu, however, adapted. He grew close to the Sultan's son Mehmet, later known as Mehmet the Conqueror, and even converted to Islam. This sowed a deep, bitter resentment in Vlad, a burning hatred for the Ottomans, and a lifelong rivalry with his own brother. When Vlad was finally released from Ottoman captivity in late 1448, it wasn't a joyous homecoming. It was a baptism by fire. While he was away, a devastating battle had unfolded. The Battle of Varna in 1444, where the Christian Crusader forces were decisively defeated by the Ottomans. This created a power vacuum and chaos throughout the region. His father, Vlad II Dracul, and his elder brother Mircea II had been tortured, blinded, and buried alive by the Wallachian boyars, instigated by John Hunyadi, the powerful Hungarian regent, who sought to install a more pliant ruler. So, in October 1448, at a mere 17 years old, Vlad seized his first, albeit short-lived, reign. The Ottomans, having just defeated Hunyadi, saw an opportunity. They released Vlad from captivity and backed him as their candidate for the Wallachian throne, hoping he would be a loyal puppet. He ascended, but his rule was precarious, lasting only 2 tumultuous months. John Hunyadi quickly retaliated, invading Wallachia and installing Vladislav II, a rival claimant, on the throne. Deposed and without allies in his homeland, Vlad was forced into an 8-year struggle, a relentless and desperate pursuit of his rightful throne. This was not a comfortable exile. He lived as a fugitive, honing his skills and observing the brutal political chess game around him. For a time, he found refuge with his cousin, Stephen III of Moldavia, the future Stephen the Great, who would become a formidable ruler in his own right. This period was crucial. Vlad witnessed how Stephen navigated the treacherous waters of regional politics, formed alliances, and dealt with rivals. However, his alliance with Stephen wouldn't last forever. As political tides shifted, particularly after Stephen's father was assassinated in 1451, Vlad found himself on the move again. He travelled to Transylvania, living amongst the very Saxon merchants he would later brutally punish, learning their customs, their trade routes, and perhaps their vulnerabilities. He even, for a period, sought reconciliation with his former enemy, John Hunyadi of Hungary. It seems an unlikely alliance, doesn't it? The son of the man Hunyadi had overthrown, now seeking his patronage. But Hunyadi, recognizing Vlad's intelligence and his fierce anti-Ottoman stance, a sentiment forged during his years as a hostage, began to see him as a potential asset. He provided Vlad with military training and support in Transylvania, preparing him for the inevitable confrontation with Vladislav II, the current ruler of Wallachia and Hunyadi's former protege, who was now seen as too pro-Ottoman. This period of enforced self-reliance and strategic observation proved invaluable. He learned to play the game, but with a unique, chilling, terrifying set of rules that would soon shake Wallachia to its core. Finally, in 1456, Vlad clawed his way back to power. And this is where the legend truly begins to curdle into reality. This was the era of the impalement, but it wasn't just random acts of cruelty. Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Tepes as he became known, used impalement as a deliberate, calculated instrument of statecraft. Imagine this. You're an Ottoman soldier, part of a massive invading army. You've heard whispers of the Wallachian prince, his unusual methods. As you approach the capital of Târgoviște in 1462, after a long, arduous march, you see it. Not a fortified wall, but a forest of the Impaled. 20,000 Ottoman soldiers and prisoners, slowly dying on stakes, their bodies contorted in agony, a macabre warning against further advance. The stench alone would be enough to break the strongest will. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople himself, reportedly turned back, utterly sickened by the sight. He had grown up with Vlad, but this was a different beast entirely. But Vlad's impalements weren't reserved just for foreign invaders. He used them to consolidate power, to establish absolute order in a land riddled with corruption and lawlessness. There's the infamous story of the Boyars. These were the treacherous nobles who had betrayed his father. Vlad invited them to a lavish Easter banquet. After the feast, he asked them how many rulers they had seen in their lifetime. When they confessed to many, due to constant feuds, Vlad had them all rounded up. The elderly and women were impaled on the spot. The younger, stronger men, they were marched for miles to his castle of Poenari, where they were forced into brutal labor, building and reinforcing his stronghold, often until they died of exhaustion. A truly red wedding, centuries before George R.R. Martin even conceived it. He instilled a terrifying sense of justice. One tale speaks of a golden cup he placed by a public fountain in Târgoviște. No one dared to steal it, so pervasive was the fear of impalement for even petty crimes. Another story tells of two foreign emissaries who refused to remove their turbans in his presence, citing their custom. Vlad, ever the diplomat, simply had their turbans nailed to their heads. "Now," he reportedly said, "you may keep your custom." Funny enough, despite his methods, Vlad was considered a hero by many Wallachians. He brought stability and security to a land ravaged by war and internal strife. He fiercely defended his Christian faith against the encroaching Ottoman Empire, earning praise from the Pope himself for his military prowess. He was a protector, albeit a terrifying one. His personal life was also marked by tragedy and intrigue. His first wife, a Transylvanian noblewoman, is said to have thrown herself from the battlements of Poenari Castle into the Argeș River below, rather than be captured by the Turks during a siege led by his brother Radu. "I would rather have my body eaten by the fish of the Argeș than be captured by the Turks," she reportedly declared. But Vlad's reign, like his life, was a cycle of triumph and tragedy. In 1462, after his infamous Forest of the Impaled stunt, he evaded Ottoman capture, only to be intercepted by his supposed ally, Matthias III of Hungary. Matthias, in a cynical political maneuver, imprisoned Vlad for over a decade. During this time, the stories of Vlad's cruelty spread like wildfire across Europe, embellished and exaggerated by his enemies, particularly the Transylvanian Saxon merchants he had often punished. It was in prison that some reports claim Vlad continued his macabre hobbies, impaling small animals and insects. When Vlad was finally released from imprisonment, around 1475, he returned to Wallachia for a third, brief reign in 1476. But his luck had run out. The exact circumstances of his death are shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts. Some say he was killed in battle against the Ottomans, perhaps accidentally by one of his own men. Others suggest he was assassinated by treacherous boyars. What is certain is that his head was sent to Constantinople as a trophy for Sultan Mehmed II. So, the man, Vlad the Impaler, was gone. But the legend, the name Dracula, had just begun its immortal journey. Centuries later, Bram Stoker, an Irish novelist, would stumble upon these chilling tales and give birth to literature's most iconic vampire. He even gave his fictional Count Dracula a Hungarian background and linked him to the Huns, adding another layer to the complex tapestry of the myth. Vlad III, or Vlad the Impaler, was a ruthless warrior, a strict enforcer of justice, a defender of his land, and an inspiration for nightmares. He wasn't a creature of the night, but a man forged in the brutal crucible of the 15th century, whose actions, however extreme, cemented his place in history, forever casting a long, chilling shadow that still fascinates us today. The real monster wasn't supernatural. It was born of desperate times and a will of iron. So, there you have it. the true story behind the legend of Dracula. A tale not of fangs and coffins, but of a man, a prince, forged in the brutal fires of war and betrayal, whose chilling methods carved his name into the terror of our history. If you found this journey into the past as captivating as we did, let us know in the comments below. Would you like more deep dives into the shadowed corners of history? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Ancient Unearth for more untold stories.